Tonight, FBI and ICE storm Pennsylvania Judge Ranch. Secret tunnel found in 89.
At 5:47 a.m., federal agents executed the largest counterintelligence operation on American soil in over 2 decades. What they uncovered was not a foreign army. It was something far more dangerous. A network of 12 operatives embedded inside the Pentagon itself, systematically stealing classified war plans, weapon specifications, and troop deployment strategies. 8 days. That's how close we came to a catastrophic military conflict. This is how it happened. The operation began in the darkness before dawn at Joint Base Myer-Henderson in Arlington, Virginia. Fog rolled across the compound like a suffocating blanket. Streetlights cast long shadows between buildings. Everything was still. Everything was quiet. Then, at exactly 5:47 a.m., it erupted. Dozens of FBI agents in tactical gear moved silently through corridors that millions of Americans trusted to protect them. Delta Force operators secured perimeter checkpoints. DHS cybercrime units fanned out across 3 separate office buildings. This was not a routine investigation. This was a full counterintelligence takedown. The first target was Colonel Marcus Fairfield, Deputy Director of Strategic Operations. Agents breached his office at the Pentagon's East Wing with flashbangs and precision timing. They found him at his desk, despite the hour. Already awake, already aware. His hands trembled as they cuffed him. On his computer screen, an encrypted messaging application was still open. Half-written intelligence summaries sat on his desk, classified top-secret compartmented, ready to be photographed and transmitted. He was caught mid-operation, mid-betrayal. Simultaneously, across Arlington, ICE agents and FBI personnel hit 5 additional locations. An apartment building in Rosslyn where Captain Sarah Chun, a naval intelligence officer, had been living under a false identity within her own country. A safe house in Falls Church where a defense contractor named David Moreau had been systematically scanning and uploading Pentagon server files through a burner laptop connected to a spoofed cell tower. A warehouse outside Alexandria where physical documents and hard drives were being packaged for dead-drop handoffs to unknown couriers. Every location yielded evidence. Every location confirmed the same devastating pattern. The Pentagon had been infiltrated at the command level. By 6:15 a.m., 12 arrests had been made across Northern Virginia. 12. A military intelligence officer. A cyber warfare specialist. 4 defense contractors with top-secret clearances. 2 administrative personnel with access to classified scheduling and personnel movements. A logistics coordinator who managed weapons system transport routes. A communications officer who controlled secure military networks. And 3 operatives with no official government title, but with deep cover identities and fake credentials that had passed every background check. These were not low-level spies. These were architects of espionage. This was command-level infiltration. What agents found in those first hours of seizures stopped senior FBI officials in their tracks. Encrypted hard drives containing gigabytes of classified materials. Handwritten ledgers detailing payment schedules and handler identities. Photographs of sensitive military installations. And something far more sinister. A master file labeled Operation Meridian. It outlined a complete coordinated theft of America's newest generation of hypersonic missile specifications, advanced fighter jet avionics systems, and, most catastrophically, a detailed 3-year strategic deployment plan for U.S. naval forces across the Indo-Pacific region. But here's what changed everything. Here's what made FBI leadership understand this was not simple espionage. It was engineered treason at the highest levels of military command. By 8:30 a.m., the FBI's Cyber Forensics Division at Quantico, Virginia had begun cracking the encryption. Analysts worked in absolute silence, screens casting blue light across their faces as they deconstructed digital firewalls and reconstructed communication chains. What they found was not a loose network of rogue operatives. It was a carefully constructed organization with a clear hierarchy, chain of command, and, most terrifying, a civilian handler operating from outside the United States. The digital forensics revealed encrypted communications tracing back to a single operational command center. Multiple burner phones used the same encryption protocol. Payment transfers from shell companies in Cyprus, the Seychelles, and the Bahamas all funneled through identical money laundering networks. But the smoking gun came when analysts cracked a secure messaging server and discovered something that made the room go silent. A video file. In it, a man spoke directly to the camera. He was identified by intelligence sources as Hassan Rezaei, an Iranian Quds Force commander believed to have been operating from Tehran for the past 18 months. In the video, he outlined his operational mandate clearly, almost casually, as if speaking to officers in his own military. He spoke about infiltrating American military infrastructure. He spoke about obtaining weapons specifications. He spoke about delaying U.S. military response capabilities in a theoretical regional conflict. And then he said something that chilled the blood of every analyst in that room. He said, "In 8 days, everything changes. You have 8 days to extract the final phase materials. After that, the window closes forever." 8 days. That meant the deadline. The same day as the arrests. The same day the operation was executed. Someone had warned them. Someone had tipped off American intelligence that an attack was imminent. But who? The answer came from an unexpected place. One of the 12 arrested operatives broke almost immediately. Captain Sarah Chun, the naval intelligence officer, had been suffering from what her handler called mission fatigue. In interrogation, she revealed that she had been contacted 18 months ago while on leave in Cyprus. An Iranian intelligence officer had approached her in a cafe with a simple proposal: provide access to classified military networks. In exchange, her family, her parents, her sister, her young nephew, would be relocated to a protected compound in Tehran and guaranteed safety and financial security. No threats, no coercion, just leverage. Just leverage born from the kind of human weakness that operates in every person. Chen's confession led to the unraveling of the entire network. Each operative had been recruited using variation of the same psychological manipulation: fear for loved ones, promise of relocation, offer of immunity from prosecution if they cooperated, and something else, something deeply strategic. Each operative believed they were working alone. They believed they were the only ones selling secrets. The Iranian intelligence apparatus had kept them compartmentalized, isolated, convinced that their individual actions were part of something larger but that they could never know the full scope. But they had known enough, and enough was a threat to everything. By 10 a.m., National Security Advisor Director Catherine Voss was briefing the president in the Situation Room. 37 classified files had been stolen. Photographs of 3 U.S. military installations inside Iran had been discovered on a hard drive seized from David Moreau's apartment. These photographs were not reconnaissance images. They were targeting photographs. Marked, annotated, with coordinates, with blast radius estimates. Someone had been planning something that required detailed knowledge of where American military personnel were located, where American military equipment was staged, where American military vulnerabilities existed. The question was not whether a spy ring existed. It did. The question was far darker. The question was whether they had been prevented from completing their mission or whether they had already transmitted everything they needed. Analysts worked through recovered communication logs, trying to reconstruct what had been sent out of the country and what remained. The answer was a knife's edge. The final phase materials, the complete naval deployment specifications for the Indo-Pacific, had not been transmitted. The operational window had closed at the exact moment federal agents breached those locations. 8 days. That's how close we came. But this was not the end of the investigation. This was the beginning of something far more frightening. Because as federal investigators dug deeper into the network's command structure, they discovered something that suggested this operation extended far beyond 12 operatives and 1 Iranian intelligence handler. There were traces of a second command layer. American traces. Government traces. Someone inside the defense establishment had been coordinating with Iranian intelligence. Someone with authority. Someone with access to classified scheduling. Someone who had timed the arrests in such a way that they occurred exactly as the operational deadline was being reached. The FBI opened a parallel investigation. They began examining which American officials had knowledge of the spy ring before the arrests were made. Who had authorized the exact timing of the operation? Who had ensured that the arrests happened at precisely 5:47 a.m.? Who had the authority to coordinate with Iranian intelligence operatives at that level? What they uncovered was a web of encrypted communications between a senior Pentagon official and intermediaries in the Iranian intelligence service. The official was Lieutenant General Thomas Whitmore, commander of strategic operations at the Department of Defense. Whitmore had been in his position for 11 years. He had top-secret clearance that extended into special access programs. He had direct authority over military deployment planning, and he had been systematically leaking information to Iranian handlers. But Whitmore was not simply a lone actor working for money. Analysis of his financial records revealed something far more sophisticated. Whitmore's son had been kidnapped during a business trip to Dubai. The boy had been held in Iranian custody for 6 months before being released with a message: "Help us, and he will live." Whitmore had no choice. He had never had a choice. He was not a traitor by ambition. He was a father broken by the kind of leverage that turns good men into weapons. Whitmore was arrested at his home in McLean, Virginia, at 7:15 a.m. When confronted with the evidence, the encrypted communications, the leaked documents, the coordination with Iranian handlers, he wept. He confessed to everything. And then he said something that made the FBI understand the true scope of what had nearly occurred. He said, "They wanted to know everything about our Indo-Pacific positioning, everything about our response times, everything about where we would be vulnerable if they moved first." They said it was only intelligence gathering. But I understood. I understood what they were planning. What they were planning was a military action against American interests in the region. A strike that would have caught American forces unprepared. A strike that would have resulted in casualties, in loss of life, in escalation, in conflict. All because one man's son had been taken and held ransom, and because 12 operatives had been convinced to sell their country for promises and false security. The entire national security apparatus was in crisis mode. Defense Secretary Patricia Ashford announced an emergency review of all Pentagon security protocols. The FBI director announced a sweeping investigation into which other military officials might have been compromised. The CIA launched an international operation to locate Iranian operatives connected to the network. And the military itself began what would become a months-long process of reconstituting its classified knowledge, assuming that everything stolen had been compromised and needed to be regenerated from scratch. The cost of this operation, the cost of infiltration and discovery, was staggering. It cost the American military an estimated $4 billion to redesign and regenerate classified systems and operational plans. It cost the careers of 12 operatives, 1 general, and 17 additional military and defense personnel who were discovered to have had secondary contact with the spy ring. It cost the credibility of the Pentagon security apparatus, which had allowed this level of infiltration to exist for 3 years without detection. And it cost American security, because even though the final transmission was prevented, Iranian intelligence had already obtained weapon specifications, military technology details, and strategic planning information that would inform military doctrine and capabilities for years to come. But there was something else. Something that became clear as investigators continued their work in the weeks and months after the arrests. This operation had been just the first phase. Iranian intelligence had been planning something far larger. Decrypted documents revealed contingency plans for additional infiltration targets. Military contractors, aerospace companies, defense laboratories. The goal was not a single theft of classified material. The goal was systematic, comprehensive penetration of the entire American military-industrial complex. One spy at a time. One compromised official at a time. One family was held hostage at a time. This was not espionage. This was an invasion by another method. This was war conducted through blackmail and manipulation and the systematic exploitation of human weakness. And it had nearly succeeded. 8 days stood between America and a regional military conflict that could have escalated into something far more catastrophic. The first of the 12 operatives went to trial. The courtroom was packed. Media outlets worldwide carried the proceeding. Captain Sarah Chun appeared in an orange jumpsuit. Her career in military intelligence ended, her family in protective custody, her life fundamentally altered. The prosecution presented evidence of her access to classified networks. The prosecution presented evidence of encrypted communications with Iranian handlers. The prosecution presented evidence of downloaded files and stolen documents. Her defense attorney could offer nothing except remorse. Chin was convicted on 17 counts of espionage and sentenced to 45 years in federal prison. General Thomas Whitmore was tried separately in a classified proceeding. The public was not permitted to attend. The details of his sentencing were not released. What we know is that he was convicted of treason, conspiracy, and unauthorized transmission of classified material to a foreign power. He was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. His son, the leverage that had been used against him, was placed in protective custody. The boy will spend his life knowing that his father traded his country for his safety. That burden will never lift. The FBI had expanded its investigation into the Iranian spy network from 12 operatives to a coordinated operation spanning 4 military installations, 2 defense contractors, and 3 government agencies. 43 individuals were eventually arrested. 17 were military or defense personnel. The remainder were intermediaries, handlers, and facilitators. The investigation revealed that Iranian intelligence had been planning this operation for 5 years. 5 years of recruitment, 5 years of positioning, 5 years of preparation. And it had taken less than 36 hours to dismantle it once American intelligence became aware. The question that hung over everything was simple. How did American intelligence learn of the operation at exactly the right moment? Who tipped them off? The answer, when it finally emerged from classified briefings to congressional oversight committees, was almost absurdly mundane. A junior analyst at the NSA had noticed a pattern in encrypted communications between Pentagon email addresses and a specific IP address located in Tehran. The pattern matched communication protocol signatures used by Iranian intelligence in previous operations. The analyst flagged it. The flag went up the chain of command. And the FBI, working with the CIA and NSA, had conducted an emergency crash investigation that identified the network, mapped its structure, and planned the takedown, all within 72 hours. 8 days of operational window. 72 hours of investigation. By the time the Iranian handlers realized what was happening, it was already too late. The aftermath of Operation Meridian, the codename given to the counterintelligence operation by the FBI, was profound. The Department of Defense implemented a sweeping overhaul of its security protocols. All personnel with access to classified material were revetted. All communication systems were audited and upgraded. All operational planning processes were redesigned with new compartmentalization standards. The Pentagon essentially rebuilt itself from the foundation up, trusting nothing that had existed. But there was a human cost that statistics cannot capture. 43 arrests meant 43 families destroyed, careers ended, reputations destroyed, trust shattered. In some cases, like Captain Chen's, it meant the wholesale relocation of entire families into witness protection or diplomatic safehouses. In other cases, like General Whitmore's, it meant the dissolution of decades-long marriages and the estrangement of children who would spend their lives knowing that their father had committed treason, however driven by impossible circumstances. The intelligence community also grappled with a larger realization. This operation had succeeded in penetrating the Pentagon at the command level. That meant the assumptions about American security were fundamentally flawed. If Iranian intelligence could infiltrate this deeply, what else had been penetrated? What other networks might be compromised? The answer drove a seismic shift in how American intelligence agencies approached counterintelligence. The NSA, FBI, and CIA implemented aggressive new protocols for identifying foreign intelligence operations. Behavioral analysis became more sophisticated, financial surveillance became more intrusive, communication monitoring became more comprehensive. The privacy calculus of American security shifted. The pendulum swung toward safety and away from individual liberty, all in the name of preventing another Operation Meridian. The Iranian government, faced with the exposure of its most sophisticated American operation, initially denied any involvement. Then it accused the United States of fabricating the evidence. Then it claimed the 12 arrested operatives were acting independently without state sanction. None of it was credible. The communications were too sophisticated. The coordination was too precise. The targeting was too strategic. Everyone understood that this had been a state operation directed from Tehran at the highest levels. And everyone understood that it represented a significant escalation in the shadow war between American and Iranian intelligence services. In the months after the arrests, Iranian military facilities experienced a series of unexplained technical failures. Drone systems malfunctioned, communication networks went down, missile test facilities experienced equipment sabotage. The attribution was never confirmed, but the implication was clear. The United States was not simply going to dismantle Iranian intelligence networks. The United States was going to retaliate, not with military force, not with open conflict, but with the same tools that had nearly been turned against American interests. With espionage, with infiltration, with the quiet, invisible warfare that defines modern conflict between great powers. This is the story of how close we came to catastrophe. Not the catastrophe of bombs falling or armies mobilizing, but the catastrophe of strategic surprise. The catastrophe of military forces unprepared and vulnerable. The catastrophe of a nation discovering that its secrets had been stolen by an enemy that had planned their use with precision and intent. 8 days stood between America and regional conflict. 8 days stood between America and what might have escalated into something far worse. That's not a small margin. That's the difference between peace and war. That's the difference between security and vulnerability. That's the difference between a functioning democracy and a nation torn apart by internal betrayal and external aggression. The 12 operatives arrested are now serving time in federal prisons. General Thomas Whitmore will die in prison. Their intelligence handlers, the Iranian Quds force commanders who orchestrated the operation, remain at large, operating from Tehran and planning their next moves. The battle between American and Iranian intelligence will continue. The struggle for secrets will persist. But the American people now know what it means to live at the edge of that struggle. They know how close the darkness came. They know how fragile the systems that protect them truly are. This is a story about power, and about how power is exercised in the shadows. It's a story about the kind of infiltration that doesn't announce itself with bombs or soldiers, but with paperwork and encryption and the systematic exploitation of human weakness. It's a warning about what happens when nations decide that espionage and sabotage are acceptable tools of foreign policy. It's a window into a war that most Americans will never see, but that shapes their security and their safety every single day. If you're still watching, if this story has shown you something about the hidden struggles that define modern security, then share it. Tell others about Operation Meridian. Tell others about the 12. Tell others about General Whitmore and the impossible choice he was forced to make. Tell others that democracy is fragile, and that the institutions meant to protect it are staffed by human beings who are vulnerable to the same pressures and leverage that any of us face. Comment espionage, if you believe Americans need to know about the threats operating inside their own government. Comment classified, if you believe this story should have remained secret. The conversation matters. Your voice matters. The exposure of these networks, the understanding of how they operate, the acknowledgement of how close we came, that matters. Remember, this is a fictional dramatization inspired by real security concerns. The characters are invented. The specific events are created for narrative purposes. But the underlying truth, that foreign intelligence services actively work to infiltrate American institutions, that Americans are recruited every day to betray their country, that the margin between security and catastrophe is sometimes measured in hours rather than years, that truth is real. That truth is ongoing. And that truth demands our attention, our vigilance, and our commitment to protecting the institutions that stand between us and the darkness. Operation Meridian was stopped 8 days before its deadline. But the war continues in the places we cannot see.